Today I'll be talking about how texts represent anomalous human behaviours and how human qualities arise from human experiences. Particularly, I will analyse how family relationships and circumstances anomalously affects one's behaviour and arise human qualities. These ideas are explored in my prescribed text, The Boy Behind the Curtain by Tim Winton, and my related text, Daddy and Ariel by Sylvia Plath, which are published 15 days apart, meaning ideas connect between them. Plath insightfully analyses the personal impact of traumatic family, particularly paternal experiences, which is comparable to Winton's experiences in the essays In the Shadow of the Hospital and Havoc, A Life in Accidents. In this presentation, I will analyse how familial circumstances induce anomalous ideas regarding suffering and how traumatic familial experiences evoke human qualities such as consciousness. Plath and Winton reveal how texts represent anomalies and paradoxes in human behaviour. More specifically, they explore their anomalous ideas regarding suffering resulting from traumatic family experiences. In Daddy, Plath writes, "Any more black shoe in which I have lived like a foot for 30 years. Daddy, I have had to kill you." Plath's use of synecdoche reflects her inability to describe her father by more than his foot injury, that's blackness has obstructed her for 30 years. Her use of high modality anomalously conveys that her only escape is to kill her father's blackness. Plath continues to explore death as a strategy to attain freedom in Ariel, where she writes, "I am the arrow, the Jew that flies suicidal into the red eye," whereby her use of enjambment, which quickens the poem's pace, and the visual imagery of the Jew flying represents freedom, which Plath paradoxically links to suicide. Examining the syntax reveals that the Jew is suicidal, assumedly because it melts in the sun. However, considering that I am the Jew, Plath conveys that she is suicidal and she melts with the sun. Therefore, by flying into the red eye, a symbol for the sun, Plath emphasizes her free flying into suicide. Plath's traumatic relationships ignited the idea to attain freedom through death, and comparably in The Shadow of the Hospital, Winton's family experience reveal a paradoxical relationship to trauma. He writes that he was still a small boy when my father suddenly disappeared, this experience being his first memory of a hospital. His use of the ordinal number first acts as an introduction to many following hospital experiences, revealed in the anaphora, "My infant brother emerging from a coma, my grandmother writhing and raging," in which the repetition of "my" personalizes the impact of his trauma. He then writes the paradox, "As fate would have it, I married a nurse. We lived in the shadow of a hospital." Despite his numerous traumatic hospital experiences, Winton married a nurse and lived near a hospital. This conveys Winton's anomalous will to associate with the source of his trauma. Thus, Plath's traumatic experiences have ignited paradoxical connections between freedom and death, while Winton's have led him to willingly associate with the cause of his trauma. Plath and Winton portray how human qualities, being consciousness, arise from experiences. Specifically, they explore the childhood idea that their father's specific qualities are universal, but trauma invokes realization about this. In Daddy, Plath's use of high modality in "I Thought Every German Was You" reveals how her childhood naivety compelled her to apply a horrendous image to all German men, due to her paternal experiences. Accordingly, in Ariel, her historical reference in Godiva, Ion Peel, Dead Hands, Dead Stringencies, connects her ideas to Lady Godiva, a woman of the 11th century who publicly rode a horse naked to protest her husband's cruel edicts. The symbolism of this is that Plath, who was riding a horse in her poem, is emblematic of Lady Godiva, suggesting that she too is freely riding away from her husband's dead hands, which are destructive to her freedom, thus confirming her childhood ideas about men's destruction. Inversely to the maintenance of brutality across Plath's relationships, Winton's guarded family relationship is confronted by unfamiliar trauma. In Havoc, A Life in Accidents, Winton recalls his child self being confronted with a drunken father who had the look of a mistreated dog, snarling and began to swing, in which his use of bestial imagery conveys the unfamiliarity of the stranger's ferocious behaviour compared to Winton's knowledge of fatherhood, thus illustrating him as inhuman in Winton's nascent mind. This experience confronted him with the harsh reality of family relations, that not all fathers guard their children like his did. He continues to write, "I had no experience of violence. I'd certainly never seen a grown man act this way," in which his repetition of the first person singular pronoun I personalizes the impact of the experience and how it evoked realizations about family relationships. Thus, despite their divergent childhood paternal relationships, Plath and Winton comparably explore how children universalize their relationships until traumatic experiences arise realizations. Overall, Plath and Winton explore how familial circumstances evoke an anomalous approach to suffering, and how traumatic familial experiences arise human qualities such as consciousness. These ideas reflect how texts represent paradoxical human behaviours and how human experiences evoke human qualities.